Hello, welcome once again. Today we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to switch it up and we're going to look at some texts that talk about Americans. The first text is called The Xenophobe's Guide to the Americans. It was published in 2008 and it's part of a larger series, many books that are called The Xenophobe's Guide to the Germans, Xenophobe's Guide to Spaniards, etc. There are many of these. And it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's meant to be kind of playful. So I hope you took it also with a grain of salt. Only about 30% of Americans have passports, but it does a good job of pointing out that the country is so big, and maybe that's one of the reasons why not so many Americans have passports or have a desire to travel abroad. I hope that through this course or through experiences in your own life, you are encouraged and inspired to travel the world. It compares it to Canada, with I think 90% of citizens have passports. So my goal, of course, always is to get more and more Americans traveling the world and visiting other countries. The other thing is that Americans can be of any ethnicity. One of the fun things for me has been to experience the American culture through the eyes of my wife. My wife is German, but she was born and raised in Spain. We moved to the United States after 3 years of marriage in 2010. And as a German, as a German citizen, German passport, people would often encounter her or meet her and say, "Oh, my friend is German," and my wife really excited, to be able to speak German with this person. And the first time that happened, this man, he came up and said, "Yeah, I'm German." So my wife immediately starts to speak in German with this man. Of course, he wasn't German. He had never been there, didn't speak any German. What he meant was my grandparents came from Germany, or I think in his case, his great-grandparents. That's very common in the United States. I'm Scottish, I'm British, I am Swiss, and maybe you've never been to that country. The text then gets back into some of the tendencies of Americans. It says that all Americans believe fundamentally that everybody speaks English. And these are some of the miscommunications and some of the tension that you get when you travel, because you're trying to communicate with someone and you just assume that they speak English and that they for some reason should speak English. Even if you are in Argentina, for instance, or in other countries where English is not the first language. They also have a vague notion of geography. They come back from Europe, for instance, and they think that the Eiffel Tower is kind of in the vicinity of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, for instance. And this, again, of course, is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, considering also the large size of the United States. But it is, to a certain extent, true. At least I've recognized that or seen that in my experience. It's one of those things that I try to encourage people to learn about geography, to learn about where the countries are. Particularly when you travel, you're going to see that many people that you encounter have a kind of a good idea of where different countries are and what the capital is and so forth. Just basic information that somehow or somewhere in the education system in the United States, we fall a little bit short. And I'm stereotyping, of course, not everybody, but that's been my experience. Talks about Canadians as being close friends, but traveling to Canada and Mexico doesn't really count. It's not foreign enough, according to the text. Americans don't have royalty, right? But they make up for not having royalty with sports figures, with presidents, or with actors. These are the people that kind of replace what the royalty means to the British, for instance. And I love this quote: "Like every other nation, America knows that it is the best country in the world." My own take on this is that it's hard to say America is the greatest country in the history of the world. I had a conversation with a student. We were sitting in Portugal, and I kind of I can be very sarcastic. I can be very cynical at times. Sometimes I can be funny. And I made some joke about this comment, right? What a ridiculous thing to say, America's the greatest country in the history of the world. And my argument wasn't that it wasn't the greatest country in the world. My argument was simply, we can't really say that any one country is the greatest country in the history of the world. And you take the entire history, the different civilizations, it's just, how do you compare them? And then what is the criteria? Like, what are we saying are the things that are going to make up the greatest country in the history of the world? And I just assumed that everybody kind of knew this or believed this, but a student got really mad at me and said, how can you think this? Kind of similar to, I guess I was channeling my inner Jeff Daniels, you know, sort of like, it's not the greatest country. And there's no country that's the greatest country in the history of the world. They're all kind of different, and they have their good side, their bad side, etc. And one of the things I remember she said was, if you don't think it's the greatest country in the history of the world, then why don't you go to that country? Why don't you go to the country that you think is the greatest? I mean, don't you want the best for your kids? So the text goes on to talk about how the United States, they need to be number one. We have to be number one. And they have this great quote by Vince Lombardi. Winning is not everything. It's the only thing. We must win, the importance of winning. And we saw this within the presidential elections of 2016 when Donald Trump was talking about how much we're going to win, and we're going to win so much that we're going to get tired of winning. So this importance, or this need to win. There's also a need to feel good. There's an importance of feeling good. And it has this section where it talks about how there was a pause in the spelling tests because some students, they didn't know how to spell. And so in order for them to not feel badly, we just stopped giving spelling tests. We see this also with participation trophies, right? Everybody needs to receive some kind of a gift or something, right? You have succeeded, even though maybe you came in dead last. Last year, it was the first time that my son, who's now 7 years old, he participated in a soccer league, and we don't keep score because I guess we don't want a team to lose. But what was funny is that everybody kept score. All the kids playing soccer, they knew exactly what the score was, and then if they lost, you know, they would deal with it, and if they won, they were happy. But the league, they didn't want to keep score. And then at the very end of the very last day of the season, somebody came with a bunch of little trophies, little plastic trophies, you know, and it had, I don't know, you participated in this league, and I quickly threw that away.